Okay, so you can start recording now, Austin.
Wow, I just noticed that. That was pretty cool.
And I will welcome everybody to the Board of Selectmen special meeting for June 14th, 2021. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first order is citizens' comments. Do we have anybody raising their hand, Austin?
No, nobody's raising their hand.
Okay. All right, moving on to item number 3. And this is maybe, I don't know, you're going to talk to this or if you're going to have Scott talk to this, but discuss and take action to approve awarding the contract for the Madison Town Campus Concrete Steps Project to Eleuthera Associates PDF Construction. And the board should have gotten the contract in your packet. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Okay, in a second.
Second.
Okay, great. Okay, so discussion. Scott has joined us. Scott, why don't you give an overview of this project for the board?
Sure. As we all know, the back area where all the employees enter is just a long blacktop ramp, and we have numerous oak trees and what have you. And in certain seasons, as we know, oaks drop acorns and everything else. It's very disconcerting as far as the ladies that are walking up for turning ankles, etc. So we looked at options, and we want to mirror the steps that are going to the Arts Barn, which I think is the appropriate approach. What we would be doing is taking the ramp, which has the railing, and that would become the main access. The macadam or pavement towards the police station would be taken out. So all employees would go up the steps, or they'd come in the front entrance or the entrance by the Beach and Rec and Tax Assessor's office, or they can walk around the evaporator, which is in the back, and come in the back door like they're doing now. And we sent it out on we bid this out on the state contract bid list. We had 7 people that expressed interest and wanted plans, and we obtained 2 bids. And I worked with the low bid, which was PDF Construction, and we were able to zero it down even more to the awarded price. So I recommend it. In looking at all his references, he's done a number of jobs in Connecticut, and I feel confident that he'll get this. In talking with him, it's going to be a week and a half at most to get these steps in. And I'd like to award it to that company. I didn't realize that with only 2 that we'd have to, because it was rather unclear whether we'd have to go to the Board of Selectmen. But he's got equipment here. He's ready to go. It's a great price, and I feel it'll be a win-win for the town, and hoping that we don't have any claims for slips and falls during the winter. So I'd recommend that we go with the PDF Construction, Paul, and move forward.
As someone who goes up that slope every day, it is a tremendous hazard. I'm surprised it hasn't been fixed in previous years. During the winter, it's treacherous, and so there has to be some sort of solution. This highlights a little bit of our ambiguity of our purchasing policies and bidding rules. because there was a lot of confusion about whether or not this had to go to the board because it was under $50,000.
Yep.
But then because we only had 2 bids versus 3, and so there was kind of a discussion about, this is, we realized as we're supposed to be updating our purchasing policies right now, this is an area that's kind of ambiguous in our policy, so.
Was this
Well,
project?
Peggy, you've had some challenges going up the walk. I've had some challenges going down. I think this is a good idea. It can be very slick.
Yes.
Was this expenditure contemplated in our capital improvement program?
This is in the planned and cycled maintenance, Al.
Okay, thanks.
And did it come in around what you were estimating?
What I narrowed it down to, it came in under,
Okay, good.
so.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, all in favor of awarding the contract to Eleuthero Associates PLC / PDF Construction, say aye.
All right.
Aye. Okay, great. All right,
Thank you.
good. Thank you, Scott. It'll be nice to have it done by the winter, that's for sure. So, okay, so next item on the agenda is review American Rescue Plan funding. And so I'm going to share my screen again. Hold on a second. Oh God, which is the, there we go. And so I think you, all right, first of all, here we go. Last week you would have received in your board packet a bunch of links to a lot of information. And I know Bruce has already had a chance to kind of review some of the stuff that the US Treasury has put out, as well as the state of Connecticut on American Rescue Plan funds. I won't spend a lot of time on this because it requires a lot of reading, but this is at least starting a running document, I think, on American Rescue Plan. We got firm numbers finally from OPM. So we will be receiving $5,335,989. We had to submit a request for the funds by June 9th, which the town has done. And we are being told that we will be receiving within 2 weeks those funds, which would put us at about June 23rd. The way it's going to work is we get 50% on or about June 23rd, and then we get another 50% 12 months later. And so the town has been, the Long-Term Recovery Committee has been kind of putting together ideas for this. And there's a huge spreadsheet that's fairly extensive that has a lot of projects identified and described. And we're kind of weeding through those and still collecting things. But I thought it would be helpful to talk about approval process and get a few things approved now just to get us moving. And these are smaller things that we feel it won't be, there won't be any questions about, whether or not they qualify. So we can talk about that list. You received that in your package in a few minutes. One of the things we did get confirmed from OPM is they are not going to look at how we use the money. So from what they've told us, that there's not going to be any review of our plan by the state. We're unclear outside of that, how there's going to be any kind of auditing process or going on to ensure that we are using the funds appropriately. We don't know. So, but we did get confirmation that OPM will not be looking at our plan and giving any kind of, dispensation or blessing to it. So, so we're going to have to be very cautious about how we spend this money. And then hopefully over the next couple of months, there'll be more detailed information coming out from US Treasury about, making sure that what we're doing is going to be approved. And then the Board of Education has more restrictions. They have to submit a plan to the state. So they're treating the towns differently than the Board of Education funding. And the schools will be getting $892,000. That's in addition to what the town is receiving. So what is the guidance? They basically came out with some additional guidance in early June that went through these kind of 7 areas of what the money should be used for. One is supporting the public health response. Second is addressing the negative impacts of the public health emergency, trying to hit those hardest hit in the community, including families, replacing lost public sector revenue, providing some sort of premium pay for essential workers, And then they specifically mention investing in water and sewer infrastructure, as well as investing in broadband. So these were kind of 7 areas. And then they tried to give us basically, and you might have seen this if you looked at the presentation I sent you from CCM, this kind of framework to assess everything. That you want to identify how COVID was harmful to the community and how this project would address that. And then, you know, and assessing how there's a disproportionate impact on specific parts of the population. So there's always going to be this lens that we have to evaluate these projects by. And so it's going to be tough, I think, to kind of think this through. You know, we really need to justify how and why we're spending the money and who we're trying to serve with the money. These are detailed. I kind of laid out the different 7 segments here and gave examples of what had been given through guidance. And you know, I can send this out to you after the meeting to look. This is just kind of summarizing things that you've already seen in a much more extensive document, but it kind of lays out the different 7 areas in more detail. One thing I will mention is we talk a lot about economic development. We've had a lot of ideas about economic development. And if you are a community that's a qualified census tract, and there's a very specific definition of that, then anything you do is going to be presumed eligible. So Madison is not, though, a qualified census tract. This is, we don't have 50% of our households with incomes below 60% of the area median gross income, and or have a high poverty rate. So that means anything that we do, we're going to really have to justify what we do in terms of economic development projects, because we are not a qualified census tract community. And then, and like I said, this is just going through the 7 things a little bit more in detail of all different kinds of eligible uses and ideas. And then they specifically highlight ineligible uses. And so you cannot directly or indirectly use this to reduce tax revenue. So for tax cuts, you cannot use it for pension funds. You cannot use it to reduce your debt or pay off legal settlements. And then there was this one point they made more recently. They said you are not supposed to be using this for general infrastructure, except those outlined, which is water, sewer, and broadband. Then it says, though, or for the maintenance of infrastructure due to the extent of revenue reduction due to pandemic. That is where maybe some of our recreational facilities actually might qualify because of extensive overuse of our recreational facilities. We're behind on maintenance on a lot of those. And that's one of the things we're asking for, is some additional funding to kind of spruce things up again and get things cleaned up, because we were basically just overrun last summer at a lot of our recreational facilities. And so that's one area we might be able to use it. So I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about what is infrastructure and what qualifies. And I think there's going to be more, hopefully more guidance coming out, another round of that as we start to develop our plan. But right now there's this kind of broad brush, no, this is not for your typical infrastructure project. And then one of the things that we've been talking about at long-term recovery is how do we provide the support to the community? And so one idea I'm just throwing out to the board right now, more of a conversation, but I think as we move forward, we want to think about these things more, is setting up grant programs, because they do want us to help to reach out. This isn't just the town spending money, but this is providing actual assistance to the community directly. And so there was kind of 3 buckets that I was thinking we could have in terms of helping the community. One would be just general community support. And we do a lot of this already through Youth and Family Services. We kind of had money coming in from neighbor to neighbor, and then all throughout the pandemic, and they were giving us, you know, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 allotments. And then Youth and Family Services administered that. And had, you know, qualifications and everything. So, so the question is, do we be kind of come neighbor to neighbor, right? And add additional grants to Youth and Family Services, and perhaps add in senior services, bundle them all together and have some sort of grant program. The second area could be in economic development, helping stabilize local businesses, helping businesses reopen. One of my thoughts was trying to create like a facade improvement program to improve our businesses and create, a better, healthier economic environment for our businesses. So those are the things we can talk about, some sort of economic development grant program. We also have some shuttered venues in town that we could provide that assistance. And then finally, on the area of arts and culture, actually the director of the Shoreline Arts Alliance has been promoting that each community allocate a certain 1% of what they're receiving to arts and culture. Because it helps both from a mental and health well-being as well as an economic development driver in communities. And so this was they gave a presentation, Eric Dillner did, and I can bring him back to the board to talk more about this, but they're trying to promote that we take a certain amount of money and set it aside, and then they would actually administer those grants. So we'd have to figure out what type of grants we want to offer and to what segments of the population, how much money we want to allocate for that, and then what would be the process for that. So, and so do we do this through town government, or do we send up an independent board, use some of our existing boards and commissions like the EDC, or do we outsource it to Shoreline Arts Alliance? So this is kind of a concept right now about how we can get out there and help the community. I've had a lot of conversations with different nonprofits in town. And the good thing about this is it's really going to target what the bill is about. It's creating equity. It's trying to get to those members of the community that maybe town government doesn't necessarily interact with all the time. And so there's a lot of different creative ways that we might be able to provide these grants to get to those highlighted needs groups in town. And so, as I said, this is concept right now, and we've talked a little bit about this in long-term recovery. I think this will be another discussion more about how we would want to do it and how much money we would want to allocate for it. And then this was just trying to lay out what we're accomplishing. Like today was just a few things to vote on to jumpstart the use of the funding. And then we could maybe over the summer have this other next round of things that, we'd want to get going on quickly. Things that, aren't going to eat away millions of dollars, but, some smaller things that we might want to fund quickly just to get things moving. And we could do another round of those over the next month or two. And then ideally, I think my thinking is, and I obviously want to hear the board's views on this, is trying to target having this broader plan by October so that we would be set up for the budget season, both knowing if we're going to have some CIP projects that we're going to target to use this money for, as well if this is going to be budgetary implications to how we're using the funding. So this would be a broader plan. And I think still we're only getting half the money now. So, but I think if we can by October really have a good sense of where we're going with everything, identified a number of the larger projects, that puts us in a good position. And then we can figure out timing for those projects. And then approval process, I think, is a little bit ambiguous still. I think that the thought was, long-term recovery, which is really kind of the initial tentacles into the community, because we have access through long-term recovery to all the different segments of Madison, putting together ideas and kind of sifting through those. And then I want to have an internal thing, just like I do every year with CIP, but look at CIP projects that I think would qualify for this, and bundle this all together to put a plan in front of the Board of Selectmen. And then I think the Board of Selectmen can kind of go through it like a workshop. And then I think we have a public hearing and let the public give us feedback about where things they feel should be included in this, and at least, have some sort of way to get their input into how the funding is going to be used. And then the Board of Selectmen make a final plan approval. And then we would include the Board of Finance in kind of two components. One would be a review of just the overall plan to ensure that all our elected boards are comfortable with it. And then the approval piece, I think is really going to be more things that are really specifically tied to an obligation we might create for maintenance or future budgets. And this is still subject to discussion as well. And we're not sure if we might need to go to town meeting on anything, because if we pull projects out of CIP, does that mean we have to go back and like alter something? So I think there's some questions that we'll have to review with town council and everything to make sure that we follow a, you know, a rigorous approval process, and that we're doing everything appropriate. And I just, this is unprecedented. So it's kind of, we want to make sure that we set up something that works well. And then this is just highlighting what the long-term recovery is, you know, for people, if you don't remember. I know Bruce knows because he's working on it and Austin sits on it, but these are all the different segments that we had set up. This was to help us recover from COVID. And then we have representatives on the council, and then each of them are, you know, charged with reaching out to those segments they're responsible for. And so they've actually been coming up already with a lot of good ideas that we've been kind of stacking up on this bigger master list. So that was kind of my overview discussion. And like, and so I, you know, I don't know how much in the weeds we want to get today. We have a few things we might want to review to approve. So I guess I leave it up to, if there's any specific slides you want to dig into right now, happy to pull those up, or we can just go right to this, to the list that was submitted. So I leave it up to you guys, how you'd like to tackle this.
So yeah, before we jump into the weeds, I have a couple of high level questions. You said that the state is not going to give us prior review or approval on projects. I get that. But it almost sounded like you believe the state's not going to review at all the money that we spend, that it's going to be the honor system. Is that what you intended?
Well, we don't know. I will say Stacy actually had reached out to OPM, the director of OPM, about this specifically. And I mean, his reply was the state will not be reviewing our use. So the question is more, is there going to be some sort of post-use audit that happens? And you know, Stacy mentioned that in the past, when we've gotten grants, that's what had happened. Sometimes they just do an audit, you know, later to ensure that everything was done correctly. So it could be that. We don't know if Treasury is going to do something different. You know, we just don't know yet. So I think that's why, you know, that's probably going to be some more information that'll come out in the next couple of months, because all the towns are in the same position. We're like, you know, we don't want to be running around spending all this money, and then all of a sudden, you know, a year from now, they say, oh, by the way, that didn't qualify after you already spent it.
So I think that's a terrific point. And so before we get into some of the individual projects that you've proposed, should we be rushing into even those projects without any clarity on whether or not they're good candidates or that they're going to be reimbursed? Your list is about $100,000, so it's not a huge number in the bigger sense, but it would be a bit of a bucket of cold water if we found out that a significant part of that 100,000 was going to have to come out of town funds.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes, and it's not my list, it's a long-term recovery list, which you also sit on, Bruce. So these are things that we've talked about at several meetings. And probably one of the larger items on there has to do with the public safety for the 4th of July fireworks, which I'll invite Chief Drum to talk about. And that was something that the board had agreed it would provide additional funding for. So we can go through each one. I think some are absolutely, if they don't qualify, then I can't imagine anything qualifying. Some of them are a little bit gray. And that is one of them, like, for example, with the refuge, the trash, which we talked about at our meeting, that we would try to use American Rescue Plan funds, but we could do it through special appropriation if we had to. So yes, there is no guarantees right now. I will say that. I don't know if we're gonna get any clarity in the next month or 6 months. What happened with the, some of the COVID money we received, they just gave it to us and then we just uploaded how we were spending it. And that was it. And so, and Stacy can talk a little bit more about that, but I don't think there was any review by the state. So, you know, I think that, you know, you want to keep to the spirit of this as much as possible, but we're also a community, I think, that is going to have a bigger challenge because of our demographics to meet some of these qualifications. And we'll have to get creative. So I think there's a long list of stuff, as you know, that we talked about in long-term recovery of really good candidates, but it's going to be a question mark. And those will be the ones I would hope we could get approved by October, right? Hopefully by October, we will have a better sense when we have the big plan.
Right,
Becky,
and I agree that the money appears to have a lot more restrictions on it than we originally thought when the plan was announced. But the devil is in the details, those high level buckets that you outlined. And then when you align that with the mission for the money that the Fed has said, I agree with you. I think that it will be a lot of work to spend this money to identify projects that fit in there. This is,
Maybe
I do call it a high class problem, right? So
maybe the committee should come up with some criteria. And then when projects come up, they can be evaluated based on the criteria.
And vetted within that committee too in advance of
I
coming.
mean,
to us.
obviously
Yeah.
the criteria would be tied to the guidance that has been provided, but just to avoid any, well, how come you did this, but you didn't do this, kind of just a general maybe suggestion. And then, so Peggy, this, just so I understand, so it sounds like there was like kind of a big list that was put together.
yeah,
And then from that came this kind of abbreviated list.
yes.
And so this came out of the committee for our consideration.
Yeah, this came out of long-term recovery. And so long-term recovery is developing criteria. She's
Okay.
got like this massive spreadsheet with having, ticking off all the things that our understanding you need to qualify for. So it probably needs to be, I think, more rigorous about how we do it. And maybe we grade things and weight, it gets you with, a 3 on this and a 5 on that or something like that. I think that's a great idea to have some sort of, right now we're just gathering ideas right now.
Sure.
So, and
we have
these,
to, like, if we're asked about how we used it, we can say, well, we came up with this criteria based on what we were given. And then at least it shows that we followed a process, right?
yeah. And I think that's really, and I think the portal that they said that these would be your projects would be uploaded to, there was some specificity about what had to be included in that, but it's not clear. I mean, you've pretty much got everything that we got in terms of like the stuff that Lauren had forwarded. There's that 150-page guidance document, which to me still doesn't really tell you much. And then there was just the presentations by that we had from CCM, and then there's going to be more coming. So there will be more information. And it's funny because I just spent some time, if you just Google this, every state and town is trying to figure this out, and you can kind of find more, like how other people are approaching it. And I think that's always
Because
helpful.
that's effective, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody creating the wheel. So,
Yeah.
so just, I want to make sure I put a
Yeah.
pin on this. So what is the risk of us not funding these recommended ideas today? I mean, is there,
Well, I think
it a
maybe
timing
the
thing?
idea is maybe, no, there's no, some of them are time
the
sensitive.
July 4th
so-
one, obviously?
Yeah, July 4th, I would say the trash issue, although we agreed that we would do the special appropriation and this would be if we could use the funds. So I guess technically it's not a 911 thing. The beach and recreation stuff, I think we want to leverage and just improving our facilities. We got behind on maintenance because we had to run split shifts in our building and grounds throughout COVID. So we had, we couldn't have as many people out taking care of things and improving things. And so we'd like to kind of get caught up this summer and just also we had a lot of heavy use at our facilities last year. So there's just a long list of things that they've got on their list to do that they would like some additional supplies and everything to tackle. So I think, given it's the beginning of the summer, to get that moving forward. And I'm looking at the list now, and maybe I can just put this up on here if you'd like, and I can talk you through. Let me, if I'm screen sharing, can I just pull, I usually only do one document. So let's see, can I do that? I can do that, right? You can see that.
No, nothing changed.
Nothing changed.
I think you actually have to share the actual app that you're in.
So I'll stop the share and then I'll hit the share again. Okay. So this was the list that you had received, and I will try to make this a little bigger. Unfortunately, she just gave me the PDF. Lauren is
Love
out
2-point
today.
font.
So I know she didn't give me the actual Excel document. I just got what you got. So there's a way to make this bigger, and I'm just trying to figure this out.
You right click and zoom. Is there like a zoom feature?
I mean, you have this also in your packet, so you can pull it up, but all right, how do I make this bigger?
Hit the three
Well,
dots.
we can zoom it. Oh, well,
Hit the 3 dots in the corner. See if
No.
that works.
Oh, jeez. What did
anybody
work?
who's watching this can just zoom it on their own.
Yeah, they can. I was just trying to it's funny because I can't even zoom it on my screen now.
Stacy, I have a kind of a process question about the money. From a charter perspective, this all feels like it's going to be a special appropriation. If the state is going to be dumping money into our account and we're spending unbudgeted money, it sounds like this is just a left-handed special appropriation. Is that what you think, Stacy?
Not necessarily, Bruce. We spend money once funds are awarded. Once we have an official award letter from the federal or the state government, we do start to spend the money. We set it aside in a different fund, knowing that we will get reimbursed. So it's more of a cash flow issue versus a budget issue. So if we know we're getting these funds, we know that we went through the process and agree that it meets the criteria, I have no problem spending that without going through this special appropriation mechanism.
Interesting.
So for
If you were-
example, like a
Because it
bridge.
becomes budgeted. Is that why, Stace?
So for example, let me see, like for a bridge or for downtown even, we had a grant, we had steep grants of $1.8 million. We did not special appropriate
Right.
those funds before we spent it. We knew we had award letters, so we knew that we were eventually going to get reimbursed for the expenses. So it's more, to Bruce's point, it's more like a cash flow issue, but I'm not concerned that we won't get the reimbursement for those.
So, okay, so let me restate it. When we do a project that is subject to a grant, it's included in the referendum as a capital project.
Yes, through CIP.
Right. So we in the referendum, that project is approved, and then how we account for the money is just our own internal accounting. But we're talking about spending money that isn't necessarily a part of that referendum. And that's why I was thinking it was special appropriation. Am I correct?
No, yeah.
Wrong?
We actually do that all the time, Bruce, like even for Board of Education grants. So we have IDEA funds. We know the state appropriated us funds for that specific purpose. So we will spend the money and then wait and get reimbursed. So those are like reimbursement projects. And same with STEEP. When we got that 1.8 for downtown, we did not go and do special appropriation for those funds. We started the project, we spent the money, committed to the contractor, and then got reimbursed from the state for those specific projects. So if we do have an official award for these funds, there's no problem spending the money beforehand, as long as we have the award.
It's not the spending the money beforehand, it's
You're talking about the planning, Bruce, right?
It's the spending the money on a project, and I'm trying to figure out where the public input and approval comes in it. I mean, surely we're not proposing that we are going to, as a Board of Selectmen, decide where this 5 million goes without any public input, right? And Peggy, and you were clear, you were mentioning a town meeting. I think you're envisioning some public input as well. I'm just trying to figure out where that's at, where that comes in.
Well, the way I have it positioned right now is as a public hearing. And then the board would approve a final recommendation. So we would do, the board would come to kind of what it thinks is the right plan after our workshops and everything, kind of like what we do with the budget. And then we would hold a public hearing, take feedback from the public, we could massage it again, and then kind of vote to approve a recommended plan. And I was kind of envisioning a little bit like the budgeting process. I think that because grants normally don't go through the Board of Finance.
They do.
No, but I thought grants, wait, we.
To accept a grant.
Oh, to accept a grant,
Any
right.
grant, we have to go through both boards, so.
But
the
the
board would-
expenditures don't, though. I'm saying. the
Correct, because
expenditure-
it's for a
right.
specific project.
Right.
So for the steep grant, we we went out to bid, or for downtown, we came up with a total cost. We applied for the grant before we spent any money. We got an award, but both the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance had to approve accepting that grant.
It's like accepting a donation, right?
Exactly,
Right.
because there could be future cost implications.
But what
So
about
both boards-
having the project though in CIP? I mean, and I think to some extent that's where you were going, Bruce, is that's sort of our 5-year planning tool. And these projects in theory could fall outside of that planning tool.
So yes, it's a hypothetical right now. I think there are some CIP projects that probably are good candidates for this money, which is terrific.
Does that matter? I guess that's what I'm not clear on.
Well, I guess I'm trying.
Sounds like we do it all the time. So
I'm trying to understand the role of the public in the projects. So that's it. And I'm just trying to understand. I'm not looking for a problem or looking to create conflict. I'm just trying to work through the process.
Well, and I think that we need to determine what we think is the right process. There's no, this is all new.
Precedent.
So, yeah, so I think we have to decide, and I'm proposing of doing it more along the lines of what I laid out on that other slide, that, ultimately we make a recommendation, include a public hearing as part of that. What's questionable to me about maybe needing a town meeting is if we're going to change CIP somehow by pulling projects out of that, right? And so because that's something that's voted on by the public, right? The CIP plan. So I don't have an answer for that right now, and I think this is going to have to be looked into a little bit more about procedure and stuff like that of what we would need to do. That's where I would envision a town meeting being involved. So are you advocating that we should have a town meeting to endorse the entire plan? Like we would actually have the town vote on an entire plan?
I am advocating that we have quite a bit of clarity around what we're going to do before we go too far down the path. So I have to believe there's a space for public input, whether it's the formality of a town meeting or the input of a public hearing. I'm not going to put a plus or a minus next to either one. I'm just thinking about the process and imagining that it did look like the special appropriation process. I was then going to ask Stacy if, is it the cumulative, all of these projects in excess of 50,000, or if each one is under 50,000, we don't have to worry about it, or the ones that are under 50,000, we don't have to worry about, or so I think it goes in a lot of different directions pretty quickly. And I will say up front, I like the idea of trying to get some projects going sooner rather than later. I would caution us not to go too far until we have more clarity from the state about what they're going to do, and that we identify those projects that we know we really want to do, even if we don't get the funding, right? Like you mentioned, the trash receptacles. We really want to do that. And if we can do that and get reimbursed through these funds, that's great, but we were going to do it anyways, right? So I think-
Yeah, no, and I think that was the point of today, was to just talk about these. And maybe it's better to go through, because I think, to your point, and so I think, Scott, the bigger, there's a lot of unknowns still. And so we wouldn't be endorsing any larger scale projects until we got some of those unknowns answered. And I'm targeting October.
I think that's
think.
responsible. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, that'll be like an October timeframe. That's what I would like, because it'd fit in well with the budget process. But so maybe, and I don't know, did this come up again on your screen, the projects?
No, we're looking at.
No, we're looking at the
overview.
in slides.
Overview of the ERP.
Yeah, I know. Okay, all right, I'm stopped.
We had like tiled screens for a while.
Okay.
We're getting
All right,
it
I
all
will
today.
try
Like,
this one more time.
I have a question for Peggy or Stacy. Have we received any guidance regarding the use of these funds for planning of infrastructure projects?
I think if the project qualifies, my understanding on the calls have been that you can use, the planning pieces of that. So there wouldn't be any issue, where just like what we do for our own project approvals, right? We build in planning dollars.
Mhm.
So yes, I think it would be qualifying, but those are questions that we would have to get answered specifically.
I agree. I think the planning would be part of the individual project that we found was eligible under the grant.
So Stacy, a more general study such as the WPCA study, which is not attached to a specific project, that would not likely qualify?
Not unless we could somehow link it to the impact of COVID over the town.
Thank you.
Well, so let's maybe if we, and actually we do have the septic studies on the bigger list. And I think we're trying to get some answers on some of that, especially the one for economic development downtown. Because the infrastructure projects are a little bit broader. When they say, water and sewer projects, they are a little bit broader in terms of qualification, but that's what we're trying to get answers on. And so those studies, because they're specifically targeting sewer, might qualify. And even though they're not tied to a specific project. So did it come up again? Do you have the list or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I tried to make it a little, I
It's
figured
up.
out how to.
I can't really read it from here, but it's all good. We have
Okay. So I think maybe if we just want to spend a few minutes going through what we had in here, right? We talked about the downtown trash removal. That was at our last meeting. So the idea is we're going to get that done no matter what. Maybe American Rescue Plan funds, maybe not. The beach parks and beach beautification. Some of our things that we have on the longer list is that we'd seen other communities already start doing stuff like this. New Haven is actually putting a bunch of money into their summer programs, their parks and recreation. So we modeled a couple of things off of that. And then we whittled it down to really just this, because they talked about use of facilities during COVID, maintenance because of COVID. And we feel that, adding some additional projects this summer and having a budget to do some community improvements to our outdoor facilities would qualify. We felt like this really does kind of qualify, and it's $5,000. So it's not like, yep.
Along those lines, do you think we could use some of these funds to help mitigate the overflow from Hammonasset? So for things like, we've talked about signage, we've talked about additional staffing, we've talked about, some of those additional costs.
So the costs that we incurred last summer, we did use COVID, other COVID funds to cover. For this summer, we talked about staffing, and really, I think that, we could look into some of the signage expenses. We talked about the emergency boards because we're still looking to get those reimbursed from a couple different channels. And so that could be one. But we've already, we already bought those, so that would be a reimbursement. We just learned, and Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, and I know she had to leave at 4:30, so she may not be on here anymore, that you can actually look back to, I think it's March 1st for certain expenditures. So we could maybe try to get reimbursed for some things. So we are looking into that, and there's in terms of some of the costs.
We talked about a couple of things at our last meeting, even as far as like getting passes and maybe using technology and all of those things. So I guess that was kind of fresh in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think those are all things we're exploring. They're not on today's agenda, but they would be on a future agenda. So, and then the emergency management, public safety, and I know Chief Drum, is he on, Austin?
Yeah, I had to promote him right now.
Okay. So they had tried to come up with a budget over and above what we normally, I will say I had a little bit of, this was a surprising number. It was a little higher than I was expecting. So I'll let him talk through, but I know they were looking at using state troopers this time. And then I also just received this afternoon a request for additional fire watch. So I'm almost, they just came in this afternoon. So, and so we have a normal fire watch budget to pay for the public safety. So for the fire guys to attend all these events, and I guess they were looking at adding additional help there. And that's not in this number, I don't think. So I literally got this like 2 hours ago. Chief, are you on?
There.
Yeah.
Did you just unmute?
We're not hearing you.
Jack, if you're talking, you're on mute.
So while he's trying to join us, there's kind of three components usually to, we have a fire watch budget, we have an overtime budget that we have to handle. And then, oh, there he is.
I'm here.
Okay. So we've gotten to your estimated $25,000, Chief, for holiday expenses. And I guess I was expecting a little bit different number, so I don't know what you've got in here. Do you want to talk through it a little bit?
Well, actually, it's to combine that we're going by the previous year prior to COVID. We're taking fire watch for the fireworks. We're talking about the external agencies that assist the Madison Police Department, which basically talking about the full weekend or the full 2-3 days of July 4th events. The way it comes out, approximately 14 change would be the police department. The fire watch is about 14 change.
Oh, so this has the fire watch numbers in it. Okay.
Yes, it does. Correct.
Okay. All right. That's where they're okay. So this is the total budget then, not the additional budget. It would
No,
be
this
covering
is-
the whole budget.
That's the figure we sent over last week. That was what we spent combined in the 2019.
Right. Okay. Right. So this would basically be trying to, so this would be a savings from the budget ultimately, right? That we would have then if we spent this all American Rescue Plan funds for this. I think what makes this year unique is that we were unable to have this event last year. And that secondly, this is really a big, kickoff, I think, to Madison's reopening. And so, I think we all talked about wanting to provide as many resources as possible to this. So this number includes everything, not just over the existing budget.
Yes, this is the full cost that we anticipate. We also anticipate a full attendance, as high as numbers we've seen, because we're coming out of COVID and a lot of people are looking to, get out. So we're going to still use the state police resources on the highway and the ramp. So I anticipate it's going to be all of that.
Okay.
So, not to write Chief Drum a blank check, I think, what we've talked about in the past, and certainly what I would support is that whatever resources emergency services and police services needs to make sure that this is a safe and fun event for everybody as a post-COVID back to normal event, I think we should be prepared to support. So I'm not, this is not an invitation to spend $100,000, but if it is $27,000 and not 25, I'd hate to see a cut made because it's just a little bit over budget.
Okay. Well, I think I think this basically is, the buffer is we actually have the money that's budgeted for this. So if we, exceed 25,000, we have money in the budget that we could cover any extra expenses.
So when we get to the point where we're taking action, I propose we do like maybe a not to exceed
Okay.
number on that. And I'll throw out 35 just as a number, and with the strong encouragement that we try not to spend it all.
Okay. All right. Any other questions then for Chief Drum? No? Okay. Okay, so the next, thank you very much, Jack. So we're gonna kind of have a vote here at the end to authorize some of these. But I think we're good with the totally provided. The next position piece here is relating to public health. And I think the one reason this is kind of timely is that we had to make some adjustments to our staffing because of Dave Anderson's departure. We really felt we needed to have a lot more clerical support in the land use office right now. And so we've shifted over Maria to work in land use to fill that gap. And in the meantime, obviously Trent is still working through all the public health issues that we're dealing with COVID, and really needing to prepare for the school year, what things are going to look like for the school year, all this other kind of community health initiatives that need to be done, possible booster programs for vaccination. So he's going to need some support. And if you read the any of the documents, anything for public health and COVID assistance is clearly going to qualify. So this would be a grant funded position that, we would look to do for 2 years to work in the health department. It would be a part-time position for 19 hours a week, and, working for the director of health. I think this is something where we do have a kind of an urgent need because we've had to shift Maria over right away, and he's dealing right now temporarily, working with somebody else temporarily that's assisting his office who can't be there permanently. So is Trent on here?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, great. I don't know if you want to spend a moment, Trent, on this.
Yeah, well, thanks, Peggy, and good afternoon, everyone. So I think pretty straightforward. We had some moving pieces in land use office, and we had obviously we're having a recent departure. With Maria leaving, being my admin, it's obviously a gap that we have to fill. And Val is doing a great job over from the police department. I appreciate that. But yeah, again, it's a gap, and we're gonna need the help, answering calls, transcribing messages, all the above, for the view permits coming across, relicensing of all the regulated establishments, boosters, radon, everything. We just need that front office help, and not just for health department, but even having an extra arm on deck or a hand on deck up front is going to help all the departments in land use. It's something that we've needed for some years now. And Peggy and the board also, I mean, this is, as you see, noted as round 1 and 2. There's another round 2 proposal for health department coming about, but I did just want to circle back on what Al said in terms of that wastewater treatment study. And I know it's not for right now, but I think, Peggy, we may be able to tie something in relation to how COVID and wastewater somewhere along the line, in terms of number of repair permits that came across throughout the year due to COVID, because a lot of people needed in-law apartments, had the kids stayed home from college. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think that we may be able to compile for that to go through. But again, that's later on. But that's all that I have.
Okay. And this one I feel highly confident in terms of reimbursement. Just reading all the documents and stuff. They want communities to put additional resources into public health initiatives and personnel. They specifically say personnel to support public health. So, so that was one. Yep.
It sounds like, that being said, though, it sounds like the reason for this position is more about manpower than directly related to COVID reasons. So, which makes me just kind of question, at the end of year 2, those reasons for having that person are still going to exist. And so then what?
Perfect question.
No, but she was basically providing.
Trying to address a much larger issue with this little Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron, I appreciate that question. In round 2, I have another inspector proposing to come on board. That's going to help with, everything else that we have been backlogged with during COVID. This is just essentially more of a immediate thing, because it's something that the health department needs right now. But to addressing the aftermath of COVID, that's where the sanitarian comes in, which is not on this current page that we're looking at. I think it's proposed in round 2.
So that would take the place of this person?
It wouldn't take the place of this person, but it'll be in terms of more in line of what you're saying in terms of justifying the post-pandemic effect and where these funds could be used. But this one in particularly, although it may seem like it's needed for staffing, it's directly related to the health department and what we need to fulfill our services.
Because the services has expanded, Trent, is that why?
And yes, because expanded.
Sorry, that was a question I had. Are there new initiatives that are going to be instituted that will require?
Yes, there will be new initiatives along with the existing that, again, can't go forward without any. No, there's only a temp there now. So, and this person is not qualified or has the experience. I mean, they're doing this on the wing temporarily. It's like if Lauren left Peggy in the office right now.
Take that back right now.
We're good. We got Austin. We're fine.
So I think I'm gonna ask I think a similar thought in a slightly different way. Is this an enduring position, right? So this is grant money. I think it envisions a temporary expense. Trent, is your need going to go on beyond the grant?
Yes, I think that this need will go beyond the grant. Again, because there's been so many different changes in land use office. I had someone hired at this rate that got changed when, something happened and Bob Cookta left, then I had Maria, and then Maria was split in half between land use and health department. Now that, we have the director of land use leaving, that leaves Maria now dedicated to land use, and now health department is without anyone. So I think this is more of an immediate need for the health department. And if it goes further, I think it will, because the health department is only going to continue to grow and do more services and just do more post-pandemic.
I think as long as we can justify that it's not just a staffing issue related to normal work that we're struggling to get done because of staffing, but that it's related to the pandemic, then it feels justifiable. But if it's just we need to go hire somebody because I don't know, that feels like we're pushing the envelope.
No, but I think that the bottom line is the health department has been completely done a 180 in the last year, right? They used to just do septic inspections, business inspections. And we were taking resources from.
I mean, a pandemic wasn't on the list?
Yeah, I know. So I'm just saying, so there's there's been a total shift of what the trying to be spending his
Very
time.
fair. Yep.
And keep in mind, all the vaccine clinics, Austin Hall was checking people in. We were using people from Beach and Recreation and Senior Services to man, vaccination clinics, to do contact tracing, to help people register for vaccination. So we went all hands-on and pulled resources from across different departments to try to provide, that level of service to people. And so the health department had the resources it needs. Now everybody else is going back to their normal jobs. And, Trent's now down to no admin even. So, but a lot of the work, especially with, what's going to be going on with the summer camps and then with the school district going forward too, we just need more support in that department. And then, meanwhile, Maria was very trained and was working in land use. So it just made sense to have some continuity in land use of somebody who knows the systems there, rather than having land use hire somebody. We were like, let's get somebody that we can, because this qualifies for American Rescue Plan funds, we can get into health. What we're going to need 2 years from now, I don't know. I don't know what, could this transition to another permanent hire? Possibly. But that's what the boards would decide in the budget process. And, if 2 years from now, the decision is that we absolutely need to continue to have this person work here, then that's going to be vetted through the budget process. We've had other grant positions before. I don't know historically if we've retained those people to stay on. I know the maid position in Youth and Family Services, I've heard that used as an example. It was decided to keep them on. I don't know. I just feel like this gets us through a hump. It absolutely will qualify. And we have the opportunity to, end the position if there's a concern about hiring personnel within 2 years.
Well, Peggy, if you don't mind, I do want to just follow up with that, and I appreciate that. So when you look at the health department, and you look at the essential services of the health department, it's your health director. You sometimes have an assistant health director. You have your admin. You have a health educator. You have an epidemiologist. You have a public health nurse, and you have your inspectors. I mean, we're not geared that way. I'm not in no way, shape, or form designed that way. So, I mean, if there's a situation where we need to come up with positions to have these funds be applicable, I mean, there's other things that we can propose, but for immediate need and for Madison and the Madison Health Department, it's just admin. And then second to that would be an inspector. But I'm sure that the funds would get approved for if I wanted a health educator, epidemiologist. But honestly, I don't think that we're there or we even need that right now, given the scope of the town.
So I agree, Peggy. I think intuitively this makes sense. It would be super helpful to see what the budgeted department staffing look like and then see how this changes it? Because it's proper, I believe, to be talking about this in terms of of a permanent position. I think, Trent is making the case that he's going to need this person ongoing. And while it's nice that we can pay in the early days with grant money, at some point we're facing the proposition of doing it with taxpayer money. So if we knew what the approved budget looked like from a staffing perspective, and then how this modifies that, I think it would be very informative.
Well, I think then, what we'll have to do, because is pull out things that people are comfortable approving today. And then we can always at our July or June meeting, or later June meeting, revisit some of these that people have questions, because I know a lot of people have obligations going on and can't stay on this meeting too long. And my hope was to get some things through the Board of Finance, because we still have to go to the Board of Finance for these types of things right now, because they're one-offs versus the whole plan. So then we would have to wait for a July Board of Finance meeting. So it would push things out a month in terms of hiring. That's why some of these were chosen as kind of more immediate needs from a timing standpoint. Why don't we, I guess we can label the health department as one we're going to have to, put on hold. And then, we can continue on and talk about some of these other ones if you want. Is that, just knowing that if we do this, it's going to be a month delayed, his ability to go out and hire somebody.
Well, I'd like to ask Bruce just how strongly he feels about this. I respect his argument. It makes a lot of sense to me. At the same time, this Board of Selectmen constantly faces changing conditions and changing staff needs and changes in programs. And it's hard to know what the future is going to look like. I sense listening to Trent, that we have an immediate need that we all seem to recognize. And so, Bruce, I think unless you feel terribly strongly about this additional information, I would argue, I think we should move ahead.
Well, I'm certainly, I'm one of five, right? So I guess my perspective is we crafted a budget for July 1st that had COVID front and foremost on our minds, and this position wasn't in it. So I just want to understand how this all, I get we've got some free money. I just want to understand better how the pieces all fit together. So if I'm in the minority on that opinion, then I'm in the minority. I think that's fine and that's healthy. We don't, if this is something you'd like to move forward, I appreciate that sentiment. And I'm not necessarily against it ultimately moving forward. I just don't feel like I've got my arms around it.
Okay, well, I think, let's maybe go through, that's going to be a question mark for now. Let's go through the rest of them and then we can talk about it. Because I think, to your point, we crafted a budget, but as you know, we, are very careful to, about how we request resources, right? And these are not permanent resources, they're temporary resources with funds that we've received, right? So, so I feel that, this isn't we should have put it in the budget in the first place. I think this is hey, we have, this money is supposed to be encouraging better services for community health.
Right.
And so this allows us to do that. So,
and that's exactly
isn't it a
why-
short-term thing though, Peggy? I think that's the only thing I see with this is it's a short-term fix, which ultimately leads to a longer-term precedent and or budgetary conversation, right? Year two,
It-
when we
it-
don't
it-
have. those
Yeah,
funds.
it potentially will, or it may not. I mean, who knows where we'll be 2 years from now with any of this? You know, what if we're doing 0 with COVID and everything's done online and maybe we don't need the clerical support that we thought? And, you know, we're gonna have a new town planner coming in.
Yeah.
You know, so I think there's a lot of shifting parts here about the departments and the shared services. You know, I've always been an advocate of trying to have more shared services across departments at the administrative level. I think for health in particular, though, that there is a need to have some dedicated support in this area that can be funded by this. So.
What if we consider funding it with the thought that it's temporary and then it would need to be reassessed in a budget cycle?
Well, no, that's what we are doing. We're just approving, all we're doing here, and we could even just approve, we're only doing 1 year right now, but the idea would be that we would make this a 2-year position. But we're only approving funds for 1 year right now. So this would actually be approve the overall, the second year and beyond, or anything else like that would go through a whole nother process.
I
see what
can
I'm
get around,
saying?
I can get around year one. I
Yeah.
can support that.
Bruce, would you be comfortable with that?
Yeah, I would ask Trent if that impacts his recruiting efforts to know that he's got a time-bound position. Does he feel
Right, that may or may not get approved, right?
does that adversely affect his recruiting?
Yeah, I think any position that's not permanent to any department will affect recruiting. Especially for the health department. Given that, I've had that position filled already, and I had a part-time person working there, dedicated. So, if it's the first 2 years, it's budgeted by this grant, and then it gets built into the budget year 2. But again, that's just where I am. But if you have second thoughts about that for the health department, I completely understand.
I guess for me, this just feels a little bit more like an operational, larger issue. Like, as you just said, Trent, the opening came up because there was a movement. The person moved from your department to land use because there was a void in land use that had been there for some time, and they had been asking for staffing. So I just feel like this is a bigger issue, and it just feels very operational, and I just feel like maybe it should be looked at within that context. And I
So
also feel like it could be considered to be a little arbitrary. So, like, for example, are there other departments who feel that they need other additional administrative support? There's really not very much here in terms of economic development. We know Dave is leaving, and we know the new position isn't going to have economic development, but we don't have anything in here to enhance the economic development component of that, which is also an initiative that's been highlighted by this program. So I would be supportive just giving it a little bit more time to kind of think through some of these things, some of the staffing things.
Hey, guys, forgive me, but I need to bounce off the call.
So
I have a doctor's appointment, so I need to run. Sorry, guys.
Okay, Scott, we'll continue on. I think that, in terms of the economic development, that there is a plan that we're talking about. And I know the EDC had made a recommendation about hiring somebody as a consultant. We're also looking at possibly sharing a part-time position with Guilford, and that process is still ongoing. So I wasn't prepared to bring a specific recommendation today. But that was going to be meant for the next round, so to speak, if we try to go for some interim things before the whole plan is approved. But that was going to
intended to be an example. It wasn't
Yeah.
intended to be a specific, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
our next opportunity for funding is October? Or,
No, it's whenever we can do as many of these mini rounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
No,
Aaron, actually, my original, when this money came out, I originally put on proposal for a health inspector. That was my primary proposal, and during that period of time, we had the change in land use. The announcement was given out to land use. Any personnel for any health department in the state of Connecticut, everything will be related around COVID, no matter what it is. If it's post or pre-COVID, everybody who's an employee of the health department will be involved in COVID, post-pandemic efforts, existing services of the health department. So the first question was whether or not this admin would be able to be justifiable with the funding. Now it's a question of whether or not I'm confused on what the question is, because if I could, I would rather have two people, my inspector and my admin. And there's no way a health department can really operate without this administrative assistant.
I'm not sure I understand.
That's my iWatch. So, I mean, so essentially, that's what I'm feeling. That's exactly what I'm thinking. The same thing. I'm not sure I understand now where the angle is, because before it was whether or not this admin can be approved under the funds, which it certainly can. It's all related to public health efforts. Any personnel that's being hired under these funds for a health department would get approved, no matter if it's a health inspector, a health educator, or admin. That's the truth of it. I've been talking to directors of health across the state. Everyone's looking to add staffing. If it's, I mean, obviously not everyone needs an admin because that person is already existing, but they're looking to add field workers, health educators, nurses, and sanitarians. So this is why you're getting it now of this admin in round one, but really that wasn't the case until Dave decided he was gonna leave land use. There's a need.
So, and then and to Trent's point, the sanitarian piece was going to be, the next in July. It's just, this is just a timing thing, what was more urgent. And so we put this as a priority over the sanitarium. That would be coming forward later. So I think we're kind of, obviously there's a lot of concerns about some of the personnel issues, but
the person has to be budgeted for, or is it concern that the money can't be justified? What is the concern?
I'm not sure that we understand who you're directing that question at.
Well, I mean, in general, I mean, Bruce, like what was your concern? Is the concern of how this is going to impact funding of budgeting in the future? I mean,
so at a high level, two things. First, in the interest of transparency and the public conversation, we're talking about creating a new position and then funding its first 24 months with grant money. So I think that it's fair to have that conversation about creating the new position. So that's the first thought. The second one is the budget that we just completed that begins next month should have, or I'm imagining did take into account all of your ongoing needs. So this is
but Bruce, to go back to last year's budget, which was done the end of last year, with this constant pressure of trying not to add new positions, trying not to grow the number of people, trying to keep tax rates down. That's why we never, that's why they're short in all these departments, because that pressure is always there, constant pressure. Keep the nut down as much as possible. Do we really need this? Do we really need this? Now we have $5.3 million that specifically targets public health, COVID mitigation, COVID recovery, community benefit, mental health. This position falls squarely in that. And I get you're concerned about past year two, but that's a conversation we would have in our budget deliberations 2 years from now. Like, we don't make budget we don't start, having debates about budgets 2 years from now. Right now, we're talking about funds we have available right now to fund a position that qualifies. So I guess I'm just struggling a little bit. I mean, look, I think if we want to delay any personnel decisions and have another meeting about this, we can do that, because I know, we have a lot of other things to go through here before we even get to a vote. If you and Aaron feel that you need to have more information, I think we can do that. And we'll just figure out another time to get this approved. But I don't think we can wait until mid to end of July. I think that we need this assistance in the health department soon. We need to get him, the resources that he needs. So, so if you're not comfortable supporting this, either of you today, then I say we figure out a way to get it, approved as quickly as possible after today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't object to a special meeting, in the near term, or the agenda of the 28th, or I'm simply trying to understand the addition of this in the context of the budget that begins July 1st. That's it. And then I correct me if I'm wrong, but there was some grant money that came in the past. Trent, have you used all of that money up?
That was for a nurse.
There's no grant money that can be applied to this admin assistant other than the recovery funds that we're discussing.
And that, by the way, was a temporary position for a nurse that this board approved without any questions, because it was grant funded. So, and just, that's kind of the same thing here, but, okay, so why don't let's go through the rest of these quickly, and then, we'll figure out a way to get this moving forward again, so that, Trent has the resources he needs. So the, some of the things that were highlighted in the presentations or that we read through was on providing public access to public services through technology. And so investing in technology infrastructure was highlighted as an allowable use. And so the library made a request, because they have a community meeting room that they would like to offer hybrid meetings and other forms. And so they came up with a budget. And then we basically looked at some of the other meeting spaces in town campus and senior center and some of the other town buildings to add similar capabilities. So it'd be like a screen, one of those bars that have the cameras on it and the sound that would enable those rooms to be used for hybrid meetings. And so that's basically what the $3,500 lines are for the different meeting rooms. We're still not sure what the rules are going to be post July 1 for hybrid, for public meetings and remote meeting access. Last I'd heard now, we were going back to the in-person meetings again, because they could get something passed through the legislature, but I'm going to be getting an update tomorrow on that. I think in any event, the public has appreciated the ability to access meetings by technology. And so I just think this is an easy one that we should make the investment so that we can offer this to the public, to use. So it's basically that's what all those $3,500. It's basically a small budget for a screen, a sound bar, a camera that you could hook your laptop to and run Zoom meetings hybrid in a room.
Right.
So any questions on those?
So the only question I have is, and Al, you'll remember this, over the years, the director of technology, Art, has made the proposal that the whatever the internet infrastructure is to connect town campus to the senior center and to the Memorial Town Hall, it's a rather weak link. And over the years, he's continually heard no from the Board of Selectmen with regards to those funds. And I'm wondering if in the process of creating this hybrid ability that we put that project in. Did Art get consulted on that?
I'm
You know what
sorry.
I'm talking about, right?
I think we've discussed in the past, I think it was called the fiber optic connection. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm gonna plead the fifth on the technology, what the nomenclature is. It just had to do with the robustness of the connections and how they were lacking, and that he has been looking to upgrade that connectivity. And since we're talking about putting enhanced telepresence in that structure, maybe we need to be adding that in as well. That can be another phase. It doesn't have to delay this.
There is a whole bucket that Art has submitted in addition to that. These were like more, hey, we need to get this in here now because we got to start offering hybrid meetings. So this was like a mini package. Art has actually put through a whole bunch of projects in the longer list that maybe some of that was addressing what you're concerned about. I just don't remember the details of what he submitted, and we can ask him.
It just seems like a good opportunity to do what he's been recommending for now for several years.
I would agree, and I think we'll have more conversations about technology upgrades and all that as we move further along on this.
Peggy, are you looking for a motion here?
Well, I'm just trying to let's finish the list, and then I guess the question is, because we were gonna, I mean, do we want to approve each project, or do we want to do a list adjusted for the removal of a couple things? I'm not sure how we're going here. I'm sorry if I'm a little.
Well, I think the simplest way to proceed would be to, for the things we agree on, to make a single motion and get those taken care of. And then the things we don't agree on, let's lay out a specific next step so that we're all clear as to what information is needed and when we could get together again.
I think the first thing we need to do then is go back to item 5 on the agenda, and that's actually to approve accepting the funding, which is the whole kit and caboodle.
Well, I'd like to make that motion. Let's accept
second
the
it.
funding.
Okay, so this is discuss and take action to approve accepting American Rescue Plan funding in the amount of $5,335,989.07, with $2,667,994.54 representing 1/2 of the total funding to be accepted by June 30th, 2021. So Al, you made the motion,
That's
right?
my motion. Yes.
And
I'll
Bruce
second
seconded it. Okay, so all in favor of accepting the funds, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Aaron, you good?
Yes. Yep,
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, now we've accepted the
easy one.
funds
That's an
officially. And then number 6, I think my thought was just, what projects did we want to pull out? But maybe we do it the other way. So if we look at the list.
Did we talk
have
about,
one-
sorry, Peggy, did we talk about youth and family services? Did I?
No, that's what I was just gonna say. We still have one more position
Oh,
that
I'm
we have to
sorry.
talk about.
I didn't
Yeah.
see it. Yep.
And Scott Cochran's actually here. And so I'll let Scott talk about this, but this was another one that I felt absolutely qualifies. Mental health is a big focus in the American Rescue Plan funds. And so this would be basically adding hours to an employee that we already have. Scott, if you'd like to just spend a second talking about this. He's on, right?
He's here. Yep.
Okay, great.
Hi, all. God bless you all for waiting yourselves through all this. Mine is really simple. We have a full-time during the academic year school-based clinician. Her name is Taylor. She has a handful of hours that we spread out over the summer months. We would like to extend her to a full-time staff person over the summer. This would be specifically to create social skills groups that we know will be effective and important for a range of age of youth in town who've been between hybrid and virtual classrooms. We believe is a real need. So we have put together a proposal for a series of groups that will occur between mid-July and the end of August. The other piece to this, depending on how much the groups get absorbed by Taylor, will be Taylor helping us with the waiting list. We've been running with a waiting list of between, I think, as low as maybe 6 or 7 families, up to as high as I think we got to 9 at one point, month to month, waiting for clinical services. If you want details as to why that occurred, all I can tell you is we still have that waiting list, and Taylor would help us manage that wait list, take cases off of it, do intakes, provide some short-term, if not take on the case completely, even into the school year, if it meant that she also had to come to our clinic after she was done with her school-based work. So to me, this is just a no-brainer. This is mental health treatment to meet a mental health need. Not that expensive. This is the difference between what she has in her current budget bank and what a full-time employee would have for budgeted hours. And that amount comes to about $8,100. I know $8,000 is listed here. I don't know how much the $100 matters, but just doing the math, it's about $8,100 to do this. It does not include benefits. The town already budgets to provide her benefits throughout the entire summer. So this is only for her hours. And yes, I would like to see this happen in the future beyond this funding. And yes, I am fine making that argument during a budget cycle. You don't need to decide that now. I do need this help now because we're in a bit of a crisis. So this funding absolutely helps us specifically for what it's meant for. And I'll make the argument later on if the needs are present to continue this. I'm not worried about that now.
So Scott, in one of the columns, there's a round, and all the other ones are either 1 and 1 and 2, and this one is 1 and 3. What is the significance of rounds 1 and 3?
Go ahead,
that-
Peggy.
Yeah. 1 and 2 is 2 would be like over the summer. And then 3 would be the long-term plan. I wouldn't put a lot of significance on that because we might have round 3, round 4, round 5. I think we have to figure this out. The idea was that, for example, the health department, we had 1 and 2 because Trent, we're going to talk more about the sanitarian position, like when we come back and do more approvals in July and August. Whereas for Scott's, we'd approve this, right away for round 1, and then we would look at the longer term commitment when we do whether it's another year or 2. We could do 3 years for this if we wanted, and that would be part of the bigger plan discussion in the fall.
And this is for July. There is a timing issue for this for us because she's only budgeted for a handful of hours over the summer. So when we get to the end of the June, she's back to essentially a handful of hours per week. I think we have her for about maybe 10 or 11 hours a week over the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So this is important for us to have this in place for July and August.
And I would just highlight that mental health is probably the single biggest health risk that we are facing right now because of COVID, especially for young people. We just need more resources. And we already have the infrastructure. We already have the person. It's just adding the hours. So any other questions on this one?
No, I think, yeah, we would need to just acknowledge that we're embarking on this with the idea that it's going to become a permanent position. I take it, Scott, that this person is willing to work those continued hours over the summer, that they
yes,
they don't have a vacation planned and
I actually had that conversation. Yes, the if any vacation time she's taking is going to be in this fiscal year. Maybe a day off or two that she's pre-planned. That's about it. So these hours will be worked hours.
Okay. So,
Can I
yep.
just ask, have any other departments expressed a need for additional staffing because of, well, directly or indirectly related to COVID?
Beach and recreation, we've talked about it. And, you know, there are, I don't remember what made the list or not in terms of additional staffing. A lot of that was more in maintenance, grounds crew, but that otherwise not that I'm aware of right now.
Were they all asked?
Yeah, all the senior management at the, we laid out the, what the plan was, and all's the, at the, can't even think right now. What do we call our senior staff meeting? We're all told to look at all this. And then also on long-term recovery, we have a lot of the, you know, senior staff represent on long-term recovery as well. But this is not going to end either. I mean, we're just starting to put together ideas and concepts for this, you know, for use of this money. These were ones that were identified as more critical and time sensitive. So, so I guess the question is, it seems like, at least my understanding is that the one that we have want more follow-up information on is the health department position. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know if the group has got any patience to entertain one other item that I think is a little bit timely. And that is something in the spirit of the beachcomber events that the chamber puts on. These are directly to promote shoppers downtown. And I was thinking that we might put, I make a number up, $15,000 in the EDC budget. And however we do that, with the expressed expectation that they work with the chamber and do some sort of regular get out the shopper events downtown over the summer. You know, it's an idea. It's not one that we've talked about at the board level.
I mean, that's on the list. We added that to the long-term recovery list, the longer list. And that was, I think, identified as like a round 2 that we would talk about in July. Or do we handle that through the community grant approach, you know? So it's either from a pool of money, and the chamber would then come and make a request, or would the town do it directly? I think we got to talk about that, but that was identified as a nearer term thing, just not for today.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. If
Yep.
it's on the radar.
Yeah, it's on the big list. I mean, if you want, I'll have Lauren send out the big list to everybody of what we've gathered to date. You can certainly see all that. It's just, these aren't things necessarily the long-term recovery committee is advocating, but they're ideas that were submitted, and we're kind of going through a vetting process. So we can send out the longer list. And Bruce, you had raised those, and those were added to that list.
Right. So yeah, if they're on the radar, then that's great, and we can keep that conversation going. That's fine.
Yeah.
Peggy, I had my hand up because before we close, I do, like Scott, I do think in terms of immediate need, I think, you know, I know that we need this position. And, you know, this has been something that's been standing on the table. I mean, even during our LTRC meetings, Bruce, I mean, from my understanding, I didn't think it was the first time you've seen or heard about it. And, you know, we tend to forget very easily, you know, how this whole thing started. I know Austin did a great deal of helping me out throughout vaccine, but, you know, prior to that in 2020, we were in we were underwater, the health department. When we were getting cases, 23, 24 cases, this was before the state came out with funding, right? This is when there was a lot of unknown with COVID and early in the pandemic. And you know, Maria was a good help because she was there. This is not a new position in any way, shape, or form. It's a position that I lost after a pandemic. I lost my admin after a pandemic. The health department lost their admin assistant after the pandemic. I think this is very important for us to pay attention to, and this is an immediate need. If we have to look at, you know, 2 years down the road on making this a more permanent thing, I'll be there to argue that or justify it whenever I have to. But I think it's worth relooking before we close this today.
Okay, thank you, Trent. You know, I know in talking with Deb and also, and this has been discussed, that we felt this was I actually thought this was a no-brainer, just because it's one of those staffing things that absolutely 100% qualifies under the guidelines. But so
if I could just say, I mean, throughout the 1 year and a half or whatever that I've been on the board, you know, the issue of staffing seems to be an ongoing issue that you know, rears its head in many different contexts, you know, special appropriation requests, budget requests, all different kinds of requests. And that's kind of started to kind of really, you know, stick out to me, is that, you know, people seem to be asking for more staffing, and it's, you know, in all different ways. And so I guess what I'm just thinking is, again, I just go back to, do we need to look at staffing on a broader level and address that issue? Because these little approvals, it's a short-term fix. I mean, we're going to, from what Trent is describing, and I'm not questioning him at all, it sounds like this position is needed. It was needed regardless of the pandemic. He lost a key staff person, so that is, I mean, and just a year or two going by isn't going to fix that. So we need to plan for another position.
Well, but keep in mind too, though, that one of the reasons land use is so short staffed is they had a retirement. Mary had retired, right? So that was also had an impact on that department. So you had a retirement, and now we have the head of the department. And so we felt like there needed to be somebody who's only doing part of her time in that department. Maria, you know, we needed somebody that had some continuity there that can work closely with whoever we end up hiring, the new town planner position. Plus we are adding staff because we're also adding an environmental planner to that position. So that's part of why there was such a shortage. I'm not disagreeing with your theme, Aaron, because I'm kind of learning about how we staff things here, which tends to be on a shoestring.
Yeah, but the only difference is, Aaron, this is not a new position. This position was approved by the board already. It was already approved. This position was approved, and then I hired Sarah Reed. All right, so I came before the board already to have this position approved. And it's only now vacant, and we want to use the funds to refill it. That's all we're trying to do.
But it should be it sounds to me that it should be a position that's budgeted for and paid for anyway.
Well, then you can support that in the budget 2 years from now, and if it ends up being proposed as a permanent position, you know, I mean, that will be the decision that the boards would have to make. Right now, we're looking to fund this exclusively from ARP funds.
I guess I just wonder how many other positions and staff people are looking for.
Well, I think, you know, there's a list of requests that the staff put forward every year. And, you know, we're trying to chip away at some of that. That's what we did in this last budget with the reorganization of the land use department. We added additional resources to public works. not as much as what they had wanted, but we did add that. I also keep hearing about this manpower study that was done 4 years ago. And that's been used as a tool to that we don't need more staff. A lot of times there was this manpower study done. So you're absolutely right, Aaron. It's a broader conversation about what is the right staffing levels for these departments. I think COVID also just put, as we all have experienced in our own, personal and your professional lives, just put a lot more stress on everybody. And we expected a lot of our staff that have to do their jobs differently this last year. So, but I think the health department in particular, this is one where we have to have somebody there, to support Trent.
So Peggy, was Maria in Trent's budget in the 21-22 budget?
It's a question for Deb, and yes.
Yeah.
So Maria's position was in the budget.
Well, I think they swapped who was supporting Trent. There was a clerical position in his budget. I think there was a change in who was going to be supporting him. I don't remember all the details. So
Fair enough. My real point is that there was a position envisioned in support of Trent in the 21-22 budget.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
now, and that was Maria.
Correct. Maria, it was Maria, but Maria was also split. Although I was funding her, she was split between two departments. Prior to
Right.
Maria, I had a dedicated admin who was Sarah Reed, and that was budgeted for fully for around the same hours, maybe 20 and a half versus 19 to 20 that you're seeing proposed on the plan now.
So we
would have the extra money to fund this. Maybe, again, this is a question for Deb, at another time. And, but in any event, we're not looking to create a new position here by any shape. That's the sanitarian. That's going to be quote unquote phase 2 or year 2, which is an absolute need as well. But this one, and everything falls within the COVID funding. I've been having calls every Thursday with the state, and quite frankly, I'm shocked that this one is not an easy approval. But again, if it's a matter of if it's budgeted for, it's not a created position.
Yeah.
That's just what it is.
Well, and I think that's where I think Bruce, that's a broader conversation about his budget. But we're once again, we got to get the position filled. We have the money to fill it through the American Rescue Plan, and it qualifies. So that's where we thought, let's just do this and then, sort this out and see what 2 years from now, a year from now, we have to look. There's been so many changes in land use, right? We had a retirement that was not meant to be replaced. Deb shifted. There was a swap between Maria and Sarah. I can't even probably explain exactly what happened in terms of the how they were budgeted, because I think Trent was actually absorbing all of Sarah's time, but she was required to also work for land use, right, Trent? So to provide additional support to land use. So anyway, I think that I think we need to make a decision about what we're going to approve tonight. I personally think we should disapprove the full amount. I think everything on here qualifies. But obviously, if we have to pull out a position and deal with it, I would say this is still going to be urgent. We can't leave it till like the end of July to approve it. So, and this is going to have to go through the Board of Finance.
Maybe, Peggy, I'm trying to figure out how to move forward here. Maybe those folks that aren't ready to approve this health position, if they could specifically identify what information they need to help them make the decision, and let's schedule a meeting very quickly to get that information to all of us so that we can vote on that. So I think for the one item, let's specify exactly what information is needed. For the rest of the items, I'd like to approve them with a single motion.
Okay, so yeah, so I think for me, since I'm the one who's been speaking the most about this, this health position, I'd like to go, the chance to go back to the detailed budget to see all of the changes we made. And then see how this overlays on that. And then I would be prepared to move forward. So I just want the opportunity to do that because I'm more confused now than I was at the beginning of this conversation.
Well, if you just voted to approve the position, then it would clarify a lot. All right, why don't we do this then? Why don't we discuss and take action to approve the American Rescue Plan Round 1 projects and services schedules, total expenditures not to exceed, and I'm going to adjust the amount to $75,009, which excludes the proposal for the health department.
So the only thing is we were going to do a not to exceed line item on the 4th of July. I had proposed 35. It doesn't, it doesn't have it, whatever you guys think is the right amount, but knowing that there's some.
I think we're going to be fine with the 25 because he said that includes fire, everything. I think we're fine with the 25 that he proposed. You want to put more money in there?
I just appreciated that it was a bit of a soft calculation and it was the mood of the board that we wanted to make sure that he was supported on that for the good of the community. So I was throwing it out there. It just makes it, I think it just makes the process a little bit simpler after the fact. If he should bump into it, I guess he's going to spend it and then come back to us for permission to spend it.
Yeah, no, I mean, he should be fine because this is taking the entire thing out of his budget. So if he needs extra money, he can use budgeted money. He's going to end up ahead with the 25,000. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So I think we're good.
Yep. If we're comfortable that that's all the money.
Yeah. I'm good with that. I'm sure we should be fine. Aaron, are you okay with so do I get a second on that motion?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, and Aaron, are you okay with that? We pulled the health department position out. We'll address that in the next, week. You're good with everything else?
Peggy, I am out of the office next week and the rest of this week. So if there's anything that I need to get to you, it's not gonna be able in time. We have a temporary position that's technically supposed to end on the 30th of June.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's something that we can go back to the budget 2 years from now or a year from now, I'm willing and able to do that. I just don't see how this health thing can't get approved today, Bruce. I don't mind discussing it more, but the purpose of the time and the immediate need, you want to meet again, I'm going to be out, and then the position is soon to end. We're running on temporary fumes right now, and this is a 1 to 2 year thing. If at all, this and the police are the two biggest things. But I mean, in terms of relation to COVID, they both are equally. I mean, I'm just a little confused why we can't maybe go see this or talk about it in a year from now or 2 years from now during budget time, where I have Deb there and I have Stacy there.
Approving the position for 1 year, basically, which is what we really are. That's all we're doing now anyways. The dollar amount was for 1 year.
Well, I mean, Trent, I appreciate you lobbying passionately for this. I guess I would say, well, what were you going to do if there was no American Recovery money? What was your plan if this money didn't come?
Well, I wouldn't have to plan for this if Maria didn't. First of all, we had a director resign. If Maria didn't have to get moved around, the town would have had to come up with a position to either supplement land use office. What if Maria wasn't qualified to help out land use? She wouldn't have been moved over, and then that would have been maybe 3 positions that needed to be open for land use department. I got impacted by something that was not even related to my department. Do you understand, Bruce? So I'm again taking another loss for this after a pandemic. The health department right? So, I mean, this is almost, immediate need, no brainer. I'm not really big on what if, the what if analysis stuff, and I know where we are now, and, it's immediate need right now. In 2 years or a year from now, if we have to discuss whether or not this position has to be budgeted for, or what it does to impact my budget for whatever was already budgeted in, then we can do that. And, I'll come before the board, but this is an immediate need. And I think we'll be doing a real disservice to the town if we don't approve this today.
All right. So, the motion that we have excludes the health department. Do you want to change the motion, or do you want to continue voting on the motion as presented? Bruce?
I'm not looking to change the motion.
Okay. All right. Well, Aaron, so this is the one excluding the health department is $75,009. Yep. Okay. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Trent, I think this is really a conversation with Deb that I will make sure that Bruce and Aaron have the opportunity, and Al, to review kind of the staffing situation in those departments. And we can talk a little bit about the evolution, because there's been a lot of shifting things going on there in the last year. And we will try to get this approved still quickly as we can. Okay. Okay. So I think that basically wraps up our first American Rescue Plan discussion. But I think this, yeah, I know. Well, this is going to be an ongoing process, and that's the whole thing. And you'll see there's going to be, Lauren at one point can send out the bigger sheets, just so you have an idea of kind of, the collection and the process that we're going through. So there's a lot of stuff that we're looking at. Okay, I guess moving on to citizens' comments. Any citizens' comments?
There's nobody here.
Okay. All right. Well, can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
All right. All in favor of adjournment. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.